I'm Valentina Staneva, and I'm very happy to start the seminar today. Today's talk is going to be by Alemohammad, and we are very excited to have him here today because this is both a seminar for the satellite image analysis group and also the eScience data science seminar. So we're gonna bring two communities together, the remote sensing community and the data science community. This seminar is at the University of Washington, so I would want to acknowledge the Coast Salish people whose land we actually use to live, work, and learn. So we really appreciate that. I will say a few words about Hamid. He is currently Chief Data Scientist and Executive Director of the Radiant Earth Foundation, where he leads the machine learning efforts to build open source tools and open data sets that can be used for a variety of applications: agriculture, urban planning, environmental monitoring. He has also worked as a technical advisor of several projects by Bill and Gates Foundation and Lacuna Fund. Before joining Radiant Earth, he did a postdoc at Columbia University. And before that, he did his PhD and postdoc at MIT at the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department. So without further ado, we'll let Hamed start and learn about what he has been working on. Just a few things I forgot. So while during the talk, you can find the Q&A button down below. So feel free to ask questions even during the talk, and Hamed may have a look at them and decide whether he can answer it at that moment or later on. Also, after this talk, we have allocated 30 minutes. This is like at around 5:30, in which time we have 30 minutes of informal discussion with Hamed for people who are interested in these topics and want to dive deeper and maybe ask more questions or just talk about opportunities, challenges, and so on. And for that, we couldn't use the same webinar. So there is a different link, and I'm going to share the link for that in the chat. So if you want, you can join after that, the discussion, the follow-up discussion after that. So Hamed, you can get started.
Great, thank you, Valentina. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon to everyone, and thanks for joining today. And thank you to the organizers for inviting me today. So I'm going to talk today about Radiant ML Hub, which is basically an ecosystem for advancing machine learning applications in earth science. Before jumping to that, I'm going to say one slide about Radiant Earth. So what is Radiant Earth? What does our foundation do? So we are a nonprofit organization based in US. We are recently expanding to hire teams internationally as well. But our core mission is really empowering individuals and organizations globally with open data sets and tools and standards that they can better use machine learning and generally AI on Earth observations to address international development challenges. And really the vision is a very strengthened global development community that can easily benefit from these resources and build solutions. We are not a last mile organization. We are more of a catalyzer and an enabler in the community. That's how we basically see ourselves. Today, I'm gonna start with some kind of introductions into machine learning neuroscience, what is happening, what is the state of knowledge, what are the existing challenges, and then that will feed into my next section, which is, okay, why we are doing Radian ML Hub and what challenges we are trying to address. In the second half, I will deep dive into two use cases. That will be the more technical part of the talk, which I'm going to talk about two things. One is how we can account for uncertainties in labeling of like geospatial and generally remote sensing data for machine learning applications. And the second piece will be on synthetic training data, which is a very growing topic, both in the ML world and in the earth science domain, and then wrapping up with some conclusions. So machine learning in earth science. I would categorize the motivation and the kind of interest in this field with three trends. One is the increasing volume of data that we have access to. You can think about new satellites being launched, wide growing in situ sensors being deployed, and also new models and actually better models being run by scientists and developers globally. That is giving us better understanding of the world and also providing more data that we can work with. And this is a trend both in the public sector and the commercial sector. So the commercial sector is also, particularly in deploying new satellites and sensors, they have been advancing in the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years significantly. At the same time, in parallel, there's significant advancements in ML. I mean, that is a growing field outside of earth science. We have been, I mean, as a community, have been using that gradually more and more. And the reason for that is it is data-driven, so it gives us an easy way to do fast iterations, work more easily with data, build models and iterate on that and run inference. And at the same time, ML is, I would say, capable of detecting very complex and nonlinear relationships. We can do that with physical models too. It is not like we cannot do that, but ML is making that easier to do. And the third piece is really availability of cloud services, bringing these petabytes of data to basically cloud and close to where the computation is. Having a scalable solution for doing computation, the serverless designs, all of those kind of architectural designs behind the cloud services that is making computation and data storage easier is really empowering this trend of ML in our science. This slide is from a paper about 2 years ago, comparing what are the basically typical tasks in machine learning and how they compare to an earth science problem. You can think about kind of object classification problems, which was one of the very kind of early problems in the ML world. They are very similar to, oh, I want to detect a pattern of sea surface temperature or atmospheric convection, for example, in a global data set. You can think about super resolution and fusion of data compared to like statistical downscaling in climate models, in remote sensing data. This was actually a domain I worked on a lot before I joined Radian, for particularly soil moisture downscaling from satellite data sets. You can think about problems like video prediction, predicting the next scene in a consequence of scenes, similar to a short-term weather forecasting problem. You can think about language translation, which is a sequence of words and things, to a dynamic time series modeling. So there's a lot of similarities in terms of the math and the problem domain, but we have our own challenges because of the type of data and the problems we deal with. We see also a growing trend in the research and papers being published in this field. So this is just the supervised machine learning problems that have been published in the 4 major publications, AGU, AMS, IEEE, and SPI in the last 10 years. I mean, in the AGU case, you can see almost a 2-fold increase in the number of papers that have been published across the 10 years. So there's a growing demand and research going in this field. Now I want to talk, okay, if there's a need for it, there's an interest for it, and we see benefits of that. So what are the challenges? What is that is missing in there? And then talk about Radian ML Hub. I would say there's a data challenge. This is a quote. I love this quote from a Sherlock Holmes story that talks about one of his, I think, staff was offered a very simple job, but for a very high kind of salary, and he was just very confused why is the case. And then he quoted that data. I can't make bricks without the clay, because he had no clue why this job is offered. He had no data point of, okay, what is going wrong there? And that is kind of showing the value of data, which I think is very important in the case of ML, generally speaking, because data is the building block of ML. It's really the bricks of building a clay ML model. And the challenge is, I can walk you through an example of, okay, why we think, or at least why we believe the data is the problem. Think about our existing workflows of how we do machine learning in our science. Let's say I'm PI1, I have a research group, I want to build a model for a specific application. I will go and generate a set of training data, whether it's using label generation or even models as labels. I train a model, I have model 1, and I do some prediction and provide some results, whether it's in a paper or a product. And I do some validation on some data set. Then PI2 comes, they are group 2, they don't have access to my data set. So they go and generate their own training data. They do training, they do model, and they do prediction. You as a third user, you cannot easily compare these 2 predictions against each other because they're built on different data sets from different potentially temporal and spatial domains. there's no benchmarking that you can do here. And that is part of the challenge with ML, because you need to have a way to benchmark these different outputs together, particularly because we can do, I would say, easily build models. The ideal scenario is, oh, we have benchmark training data sets that is accessible to everyone, whether we are talking about an oceanographic problem, an atmospheric problem, a land surface problem, and then different groups can build models against the same data set for training and validation. And then we can do model benchmarking. So we can see where we stand in terms of advancing our understanding of that field. Good examples of that is the ImageNet in the computer vision world, which was one of the very first data sets in that field. It's a huge data set, image annotations, about 14 million data points at this time. And they ran about for 7 or 8 years annual competition on this data. And you can see here, these are years from 2010 to 2017. And this is like the percentage that the model was wrong in terms of prediction. Over the years, people were building better and better and more accurate models. And this was really benchmarked against the same data set. So it was very transparent and everybody knew, okay, what worked, what didn't work. And many innovations came out of this kind of challenge and open data set. We have examples of that data set in our community, not too many of them, but I will mention some examples. Big EarthNet is one example. This is a land cover classification data set. It is an image classification problem. So there's no segmentation. It just tells you for this chip, for example, what land cover classes you see in there. It's based on the satellite Sentinel-2. Some of you might be familiar. It's a European multispectral satellite at 10 meters spatial resolution. It has a lot of chips. It has around 600,000 of those chips. But the issue is this is only across EU, the European Union, 10 countries in there. So it is geographically confined, but it is a relatively rich data set. Chesapeake Bay land cover data set is another one, which has labels across the Chesapeake Bay area. It has basically human annotated data, and it also has building footprints from a Microsoft product, all mapped on top of 2 source of images. So it's a fusion data set, basically. It has NAPE, which is the 1 meter resolution aerial imagery across the continental United States, and then the Landsat 8 satellite at 30 meter resolution, all of them mapped to the same grid. Very high quality and ML ready data set. Very good example of another land cover, and this is a segmentation problem. SpaceNet is another one. This was a community that produced 7 different benchmark data sets. I think this is a very few handful of data sets that we can really call them benchmark, because they had a data set, they had baseline models with them, and they had metrics of evaluation all accompanied with them. It was very much focused on roads, buildings, very high resolution imagery, usually from Digital Globe and Maxar, which you might know is the imagery you usually see in the base map of Google Maps imagery, and change detection. They also had one competition on radar data, the synthetic aperture radar or SAR data. And these are all open source. The ones that I have mentioned so far, these are all open source and openly accessible data set. And lastly, WeatherBench. This is a more weather focused data. I think it's the first one we have seen focused on ML. It has different kind of atmospheric variables from temperature, vorticity, precipitation, cloud cover, all based on ERA 5. And it's focused on how can we build a better, basically, weather forecasting model. So people are building models and benchmarking against that. So we have these good examples in the earth science, but still there are challenges that I mentioned some of them. Particularly the first and the top one is lack of geographical diversity or geodiversity in the data. Many of these data are produced in the developed part of the world, particularly US and Europe, and they're confined there. But as we know, earth science is much more heterogeneous when you think about the global phenomena. Whether you're thinking about these are croplands across the world, the geographical distribution of those, the heterogeneity of those. Actually, beyond the imagery, you can think about human practices on top of those lands, which will be diverse. So that is a key indicator, and we don't have that much geographical diversity in the data. In many cases, there is a scarcity of data. We don't have actually the label either. So we can't even generate a good training data set in that case. Data accessibility is getting better, and that's one of the things I will mention in Radian ML Hub, but that has been an issue. Where do you find these data? I mean, we can probably run a survey from participants of this webinar. How many of you did know that all of these data sets existed, for example? It's not easy to find these data sets, even if they are published on a website somewhere. And ML readiness and interoperability. So the data should be in a way that for a programmer or a data science person who is not necessarily a geospatial scientist, who doesn't know about, for example, projections or how to deal with different grids and things like that, they can start working with the data and build models to better understand it. And then if needed, go down the road and learn more about the geospatial kind of pre-processing and things like that. So the data should be as much as possible in an ML ready format. And if we can address these challenges, then our models will be biased or can't capture basically the wide range of outcomes in space and time. More broadly, so I mentioned a lot about the training data challenge. There are two other pillars into the challenges of ML in earth science. One is on the model development, which I'm not getting into particularly. How can we better incorporate like physical constraints into the models and architectures that are like pre-trained models that we can easily adapt for different domains and transferability of those models across space and time. And then documentation and sharing of those. How can we better do that? What are the standards for that? What are the incentives and mechanisms to basically encourage the community to share those? This is from an article we published in AGU EOS last year. If you're interested, you can look for that. It was outcome of an expert workshop we hosted with the NASA Earth Science Data Systems. You can advancing AI for Earth Science, a data systems perspective. It is in the AGU EOS. So with all of these challenges, now I'm going to tell you about Radian ML Hub and the best practices and the kind of services we provide. So in a nutshell, ML Hub has three pillars of activity. It is basically what we call a set of ML commons for Earth observation. We host geospatial training data sets. So we have an open repository on the cloud, which is open to everyone. You can go and search for the existing data sets. Some of them, the ones that I mentioned earlier, like Earth space, and all of them are now hosted on ML Hub. We are getting to also host ML models. So if there's like a benchmark model that has been developed on that data set, you can also easily query and find that. So the first really property there is easy search and finding of the things that are out there, so you can easily find them, and then making them a standard so people can easily put them into use, whether they want to run it for inference or use, for example, a pre-trained model to build a better model or for another domain. We also run competitions on these data to bring more kind of attention and the community into this and kind of innovation. And we generate some of the data ourselves. So we fill the gap with some of these training data sets by running labeling campaigns or doing some like matching between different data sets to generate those benchmark data sets. We work very closely with the broader community. That's part of our role as a kind of a neutral entity in this sector. We convene to develop standards and best practices so we can better have toolings and APIs and data repositories that talk to each other. We also host like technical working groups, for example. The report I mentioned from at AGU US, that was output of an expert workshop. And last but not least, it's an education and market information. We run training programs and boot camps focus on this problem, and also do like monthly outreach and market information. For those who might be interested, this is the only kind of architectural slide I have. How this ecosystem works, we basically have a standard for data catalogs, which is called the stack. I will put one slide next after this to mention what is that, which is enabling us to basically catalog as many diverse geographical data sets as possible. And these data sets can sit on any cloud. So we have data, for example, now on Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure. All of them catalog the same way and serve to the user through the same portal. So if you come to our API, whether you go to the public endpoint API or the Python client, which we have recently released, or the registry on the web, you can find those data sets, use search parameters with names, spatial or temporal domains, or any other property of that data set and easily find them. That's really the key aspect of making it easy for different types of people with different kind of skill sets to easily find the data and access them. And then when you want to read the data, you can, if you want to download it, you can easily go and download it. Or if you want to read it directly to a programming interface, you can do that with the Python client and the API. Just one slide on what is a stack, because I mentioned that a stack is basically a standard for cataloging your data. So think about, you want to search for a specific, I don't know, property, a variable, or even a scene from a satellite over a specific region and a specific time. Before Stack, if you would go to NASA or ESA or a commercial company API or USGS for Landsat, each of them had a different way of cataloging their data. A simple example of that is, for example, if you were searching for cloud cover in a scene, some of them would be between 0 and 1, some of them would be between 0 and 100%. So all of these discrepancies would make it hard for the user to easily find the data. Stack tried to address that, and it's now becoming a good community standard adopted by both the public sector and the commercial sector to better catalog our data in a standard format and enable that search and discovery. And it's all based on open source. And I think we had many people from academic, commercial, public sector contributing to that. And we use a Stack ourselves. So MLHub repository, this is an example of a data set, for example, we have on crop type classification in Kenya. Actually was part of a competition as well. This is the landing page and a registry. When you go, you see the data, you see the DOI. So every data set has a DOI. So you can track the version and everything, the description, the documentation is hosted. The license, which is usually some version of the Creative Commons. We try to do the Creative Commons by attribution, which is the open version. Sometimes there are restrictions in terms of non-commercial use or share alike on that, but they have a core CC BY license. And all of them follow the fair data principles, which is the data set should be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. I think one of the key pieces is the last one, the reusability, that if a user is downloading this data, they can easily understand on their own without emailing the PI or the developer how to use the data, the documentation, the format, everything should be easily understandable to them. And that's one of the key pieces of building this repository. Sorry, I went too fast. So this is a basically overview of the catalog of the Radian ML Hub at this time. The ones in gray are the ones that will be released in the next couple of weeks. We have various crop types data sets. We have a land cover data sets I mentioned. We are starting to add more building footprints. This is on very high resolution imagery or sometimes even drone imagery. We recently had a data set on tropical cyclones for wind speed detection, or those of you who might be familiar with GOES satellite, a geostationary satellite. We had a data set based on that. Wildfire fuel estimation, particularly in the Western US, a combination of Landsat data and SAR data, and a surface water data set that is coming up. And I want to mention that, as I mentioned in the beginning, just emphasizing, we don't generate all of these data sets. Many of them are community data sets that are hosted on our repository. You can think of us as a library, a public library that has a lot of books on the shelf. We write some of the books ourselves, but majority of them are for others, and they get the credit for that. The citation, the DOI is under their name. We're just facilitating that publication and sharing. One slide on a ground referencing guideline. So one of the challenges in earth science is in many applications, your target variable or the thing you want to estimate basically should be collected on the ground. You can think about crop type in agricultural applications or yield. You can think about snow depth. There's a lot of good campaigns from UW, people who are doing like snow monitoring. You can think about precipitation. You have a gauge on the ground and doing that. And all of those are basically ground reference data. The challenge is the way you collect those data, the metadata you have with that, the coordinates and everything will impact how you can generate a high quality training data set. So we worked with several community members to develop a ground referencing guideline, basically. How you do this ground referencing, what properties you should be caring about, and how to collect them, how to record them to make sure you can generate a high quality training data set out of that. This has been well received, particularly I think more in the land surface community, those who are doing land cover classification or agricultural monitoring, but it's applicable to other domains as well. And this is something, if you're interested, you can go that. I will share the slides later on, but the link is bit.ly ground reference guide. Should be easily landing. And all of these are on our GitHub page, which is Radiant Earth Organization. I mentioned competition, so we hosted 2 last year, 3 actually. The third one was on the tropical cyclone wind estimation. I can give you an example on that. So this was basically estimating wind speed in real time from GOES satellite imagery. The NASA team who had generated the initial data set had a, I would say, basic deep learning model running on that data set with an average RMSE of about 10 knots or 10.2 knots. The top winner of the competition is now doing 6.6 RMSE. 6.6 knots for RMSE. So about 40% improvement on doing that. And the purpose of that competition is multiple things. First of all, you're outsourcing a lot of solution, and a lot of people will challenge your data set and build better models in a way. Secondly, you're building capacity and education. It's good for people to, oh, there's an opportunity to do this thing, and they will get excited to also join this field and do work on more interesting problems. So they're really a multifaceted problem for us. And in summer, we are going to have another one, a crop type classification in South Africa. And this is going to be, I think, interesting problem because we're going to combine multispectral data with radar data. Lastly, before I get to the use cases, we have an agreement with NASA EST as a grant through the Access program, and that we're going to expand a Radian ML Hub in multiple directions. One is the Python client, which we have just started on releasing the beta version of that. We are developing a model repository, I briefly mentioned at the beginning. So how this will work is simply you are a developer or a researcher, you have built a machine learning model, you're putting it on GitHub, you want to share it publicly, but you can also register it on MLHub. So there will be a way you can collect a set of metadata for your model, think about spatial and temporal properties, what training data you use to generate the model, who owns the model, who did the development, what accuracy metrics did you develop for the model, and then you can register that model using those properties on MLHub so people can easily discover your model. So if someone comes to our API and search for that model for specific kind of application areas or regions, they can easily land in your GitHub page. So we are building that basically model catalog and model repository. And also expanding our training data catalogs will be part of this work with the NASA ESDS team. So this was really broadly what is MLHub, why we are doing things like that. But we also work on specific problems in this domain, and I want to talk about two of them. The first one is accounting for uncertainty. So there is a big difference between, I think, broadly speaking, earth science and the classical computer vision world. And this is something that sometimes is missed in the community. We go and take models and approaches from the computer vision world without taking into account the challenges or the kind of implicit properties of our domain. And the first one is training data error. Think about an annotation problem. You're looking at satellite imagery and annotating field boundaries, or looking for some burnt area, for example, a polygon, and then using that as a target variable in your data sets. There is a lot of human interpretation there that causes uncertainty in your data, and that is embedded in your data set inherently, because that is the kind of collection related error, as we may call it. But there are also design related error, how you define your classes, how you basically distinguish between different classes, what is the decision tree there. To address these, we had an expert workshop together with our colleague, Professor Estes from Clark University. He was the PI on this work. And this project was basically, this workshop was looking at, okay, how can we better account for errors in our training data sets in our science? And we came up with a set of recommendations. You can, if you're interested, you can read this review paper. But it's all around, first of all, accounting for that error, meaning that, okay, understand there's always some uncertainty and error there. And you should relay that information to your end user, to the person or the group who is using your training data set. And then recommendations around how to minimize those, what to consider for design related errors and also collection related errors. I can walk you through one example because we did that ourselves. So we generated a data set called land cover net, which is for land cover classification based on Sentinel-2 imagery, which is a 10-meter global satellite, multispectral, and it collects data every 5 days globally. So it's a very good, and I would say it's the highest resolution open source or open access satellite data you can access. And this is an example, for example, from Nigeria. And the key for us was a geographical diversity of this data set. But the challenge was, okay, we are going to use a human or many of them, a group of people to label the imagery for us. So how can we come up with a better way of accounting for uncertainties and human error? So first of all, this is the steps we took to generate the data set. We gathered the community and defined a taxonomy. Okay, what are the classes we can label at 10-meter resolution and what should we consider? Then we went through a sampling of regions that we want to generate the data. And this is a, I would say, chicken and egg problem, because if you know the land cover in a region, why do you need a training data set? if you don't know it, how should you sample it to be representative? So it was a good challenging problem. If you guys were interested, we can talk about it later in the next session. I'm gonna skip that. I want to talk about the consensus here. And then we had a guess label generated for each pixel, and then send this to a team of trained users to do the validation. And then we run a consensus. What I mean by consensus is, so this was the dashboard that people were using to annotate the imagery. They would look at the left part, which was the image and the background and the bounding box around it. For example, you see bare ground here with a kind of a dirt road here. And then they had multiple classes here to select from and use a paintbrush here to do the labeling or validate the guess label that we had provided to them. And this is a time series problem. So they will look at the time series of imagery on the left and decide on the class because there's some dynamics in the land cover. So inherently, there will be some uncertainties and error here. One key aspect was, so we asked every user to authenticate. So we know who is labeling, who in the terms of ID, not necessarily individual's name, who is labeling which chips. So we had that data set. We asked each chip to be labeled by 3 independent users. So basically we had a IID data set of 3 different labels for the same imagery of, for example, 256 by 256 pixels. You can think about the Bayesian problem here. So you have 3 different data sets, 3 different annotations. If you can assign an accuracy to each of those, then you can do a Bayesian averaging and come up with a consensus score. And that's what we did. We labeled some of the chips ourselves as like expert labelers, and then use that to define an accuracy score for each user, PWI, if you may annotate it here. And then using that, we use a simple Bayesian averaging here to get the probability of the theta class for each pixel. Theta is the 7 land cover classes that we had. We used 3 here. This was like a limitation on the resources we had. Optimally, you can do 4 or 5. But this really helped us to bring a better understanding to the classes and the labels we are putting out. And what we produce at the end is a most probable class in each pixel. In addition, we also report the consensus score. So if a user is using that data set to train their models, they know how accurate, or put it in the correct terms, how much agreement was on that label when they were generating it. And this is a distribution of scores, consensus scores across the land cover net for the Africa. We are now generating the Latin America. About 60% of the data was 100% agreed among the 3 individuals who labeled it. And about 94% of it had more than 60% consensus score. So there is some variability there. There is part of the data set that is not 100% agreed, and that is the nature of the human annotation at 10-meter spatial resolution. But it's good inform, and the end user can really use those scores to build a model that is probabilistic and learns those basically uncertainties in the data. For those of you who might be interested, these are just some snapshots of the imagery we have labeled on the base map imagery. Blue is the water. These are croplands in dark green. These are built-up areas. This is woody vegetation, and these are natural vegetation areas. The version 1 of land cover net, as I mentioned, is across the African continent. And with this method, we labeled around 130 million pixels plus the consensus score. And this was a lot of tasks, about 380,000 tasks that each user labeled. And then we basically built the consensus on top of that. This is available on ML Hub if you are interested, and you can also go to landcover.net to get the data. And it's a distribution of classes in the African continent. This will change from region to region, of course. We have also published a workshop paper at NORIPS last year, and it is on archive if you're interested. We have explained this methodology in more detail there. So lastly, the topic of synthetic training data. Why do we need, first of all, I think that might be a question, okay, why synthetic data? I mentioned at the beginning, we have a lot of data in this field, so why now I'm talking about synthetic data? The challenge is when we need to use ground reference data. So in applications like, I have a picture here, this is an agricultural area, and we have some of these field boundaries mapped with their crop type. But we can't do this at large scales. We don't have that high quality labels at a scale. That is one problem. This is a very extensive and expensive effort. You need to have a human on the ground, walking around the field in many cases, or sometimes use a pre-generated, basically model-generated field boundary, but validating it on the ground, and then capturing the like crop type, crop yield, and other properties that you are interested in. And it is hard to do that in remote and kind of dangerous areas. You can't go everywhere and collect these data, even if you have resources. And lastly, some of these information, based on where you're collecting it, if you have the consent or not, contain personally identifiable information, because basically you're saying this land, which you can potentially go to the land registry and see who owns it, is producing X amount of this crop in this season. In some countries, based on the regulation, this is considered a personally identifiable information, so you can easily share that data. So these are challenges with ground reference data, and it got us motivated to think about, can we augment the limited ground reference data that we have using some ML techniques? And one of that is synthetic training data. Can we use that to generate synthetic training data to augment that and then build a better classification model? The incentive of that comes from, again, computer vision field. You might think about this nice human beings in this picture, very nice pictures and headshots. All of these are synthetic faces. Some of you might be familiar with the website thispersondoesn'texist.com. These are all model-generated human faces. They don't exist in the real world. And that's how much the synthetic, or in the, I think, ethical terms, the fake faces and the fake imagery has gone, how far they have gone. But now we are gonna basically use that for the better, which is, okay, all these developments, can we benefit from them and generate synthetic data for actually improving our model performance? We are not gonna use that to simulate some random field boundary. So this is a, I think, three-step problem. I'm gonna touch base on the first one that we have solved so far. The next two hopefully will be done in the next 6 months or so. So we basically broke down the problem of, okay, we wanna first generate synthetic satellite imagery, just raw satellite imagery, see if we can do that first. Then we are gonna generate a synthetic satellite imagery, which is labeled. So we have a segmentation label on top of it. And then doing that as a time series, because that's the key aspect to many land cover and kind of land surface applications. So the key aspect is the first one, which is the unlabeled synthetic satellite data. So satellite imagery that we use is the Sentinel-2. And this is a multi-resolution data set, meaning that the bands that you have in the imagery are not, first of all, RGB, or RGB, near infrared, shortwave infrared, and other bands. We have 10 bands here, and they have different spatial resolutions. The first 4 bands are at 10 meter, but the next 6 are at 20 meters. So you have a mismatch between those. And we need to account for that in our synthetic data, because the model should learn the same pattern. So we started with around 100,000 sample images in Kenya. That's where we have actually ground reference data. And try to synthesize that basically satellite imagery using a generative adversarial network model. Some of you might be familiar with GANs. GANs, I mean, I will try to explain it in a minute. It is basically a min-max optimization problem. So you have some real images and you wanna augment them and generate more similar to those. So you have a model that has 2 kind of sub-models, a generator model, which receives random noise as input and tries to generate images that are similar to your real images, but they are not always the case. So there is a discriminator model that tries to look at these synthetic images and the real ones and see if it can distinguish between those and say which one is real and which one is fake. So when you train this whole ecosystem, the generator is trying to cheat on the discriminator to say, oh, this image that I generated is actually real. And the discriminator is trying to catch generator's hand, say, no, this is fake. So when you generate this in a kind of a loop, it will optimize in a way that the generator can generate very realistic images, and the discriminator is just helping with that ecosystem. And at the end, when both of the models are trained, you just use the generator to generate synthetic images that are very similar or close to your real images. That's basically the baseline of the GAN networks. There are multiple versions of that, but that's really the essence of it. And then we have examples here. So these are examples of real satellite imagery access the ecosystem in Kenya that we were working with. In the next slide, I'm going to show you synthetic ones. I mean, first of all, you can see visually how different they are. it's really hard or almost impossible to distinguish these two from each other. I will go back and forth so you can look at them. These are the real ones. You see various patterns here. Some of the darker areas are more like built-up areas or croplands. These are more bare grounds and kind of spatial and geographic patterns there. And these are, again, the synthetic ones. So there's many of these that we have generated, and we have optimized the model to be able to do that. We actually had series of experiments to do that and gradually improve the kind of deep and kind of extent of the model, and became more deep, and also at the end try to make it as much as possible efficient in terms of memory use and everything. I will refer to the paper at the end if you're interested to see how we come up with the details of this. But we also did this for multispectral data. That was another key aspect of it. So you can see different bands in different columns here, and each row is a different image. These are real images, and you see there is some patterns across the bands because these are meaningful signatures of the Earth's surface. The same happens in the synthetic data. So in the synthetic data, we have good correlation across different bands, and they are to their native resolution of 10 meter and 20 meter. We have captured all of those properties in our synthetic data. If you're interested to try out, you can go to isthisplacereal.com and see if you can guess some of these images being real and synthetic. It's basically a game. You will receive a score at the end. And the paper is also on arXiv if you're interested, generating synthetic multispectral satellite imagery from Sentinel-2. With that, I would like to conclude. Just summarize what I was basically starting at the beginning, which is there is an increasing trend in using ML techniques in earth science, and we will see more of that in future. I believe we are just beginning to see the impact of that in earth science, what we can do with that, and what science and basically inference and insight we can derive from that. A key piece in this ecosystem is really sharing and publishing training data sets and benchmarks. If we want to advance this field as a collective community, we really need to do that. And I think more incentives and more mechanisms are needed for that. We need to also go beyond what I would call adopting ML and try to customize it for earth science constraints. I talked about uncertainty in data. I think that is a key piece. Generally probabilistic frameworks. I mean, when you go to weather forecasting and climate modeling, we don't have anything as a deterministic phenomena. Everything is probabilistic, and we need to account for that when we are using ML. And lastly, the point that I didn't touch base on is the constraints in the physics. We know mass balance, energy balance, all of those are there. They are not going to go away. That is part of our nature. So if we can embed them, which there are good efforts going on these days across different research groups, into the ML frameworks, that would be really an optimal scenario for using these methods. And I think the synthetic data was the last piece, which will be playing a promising role in the whole ML ecosystem and improving inaccuracies. I would like to also acknowledge the various collaborators and partners in academic, industry, government, who we have worked with to either generate data, work on standards, publications, and it has been really a fruitful collaboration to work with this diverse group of community globally. And with that, thank you all for listening. This is our links to the website. We also have a public Slack channel. If you want to join and chat with people, share problems, learn about new things, you feel free to do that. It's a bit.ly link MLHub Slack. And with that, I will hand it back to you, Valentina. And if there's any questions, feel free to put it in Q&A, and I'm happy to answer those now.
Thank you, Ahmed, for a great talk. Everybody can go and into the Q&A button and add their questions over there, and I can help maybe reading those. So there is a raised hand. Okay, there is no more raised hand.
Yeah, Amanda, if you want to ask a question, please put it in Q&A or in chat.
Okay, we have one or two. This is Scott. Okay, hello, Scott. I know Scott, actually. Thank you for joining. So I will read the question maybe for everyone. Valentina, is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
So Scott is asking, what are the advantages over GAN generated images versus augmented images with random rotations and displacement. I think that the main advantage is more diversity, because when you do kind of deterministic changes to the image, which is rotation, flipping, or adding just random noise, you're not adding much diversity to the patterns you have there. The GAN can be more realistic in terms of the diversity you can get. How much you can get is what we are testing now. That is part of the hypothesis, I would say. The second question again from Scott, does MLHub have any plans surrounding time series oriented earth science data sets like seismology? Nothing immediately. We have been, I think, primarily focused on earth science in terms of the land surface, atmospheric, and kind of biogeosciences. But if there are interested groups or data sets that you know are interested to share their data sets or publish, we can do that. From a technology perspective and a mission, we are happy to do that. But from our programmatic perspective, we have been focused, I think, on the other domains of the earth science. Thank you, Scott. Next one from Ian. The GANs are very cool. The model trained and the synthetic data was tested on real images. They are asking, GAN biases didn't propagate through. So first of all, I should emphasize, as this is the first part of the project, we haven't put the GAN synthetic data yet into the actual classification model. We are doing that right now. So we have tested it against the real images in the sense of similarity, and we see the basically similarity there. And the website that we ask you to go and play with it, we have asked many people, and we are seeing that majority of the cases, people cannot really distinguish between the real and the synthetic. So at the human level, at least we know they are very close. But in terms of the actual implementation in a, okay, does it improve the accuracy of a classification model? That's what we are doing now. Having said that, we had a separate study in parallel to this, which along with that publication you can see on arXiv, which we tested a GAN classification model, not a synthetic data, and a fully supervised CNN model for classification. We used a land cover classification problem, Sentinel-2, all in US that we have enough data just to compare the two models. The GAN model generalizes better to unseen data. So if you train it, for example, in Missouri and take the model to Minnesota, the GAN does better than the CNN in terms of predicting the classes. I think that was a good lesson learning there in terms of capabilities of GAN. And that's why we are heavily investing in using it and using it for synthetic data. Next, when Will is asking, the synthetic data is cool. I was wondering how your group plans to use it to solve one of the core issues you discussed, which is the need for ground truth and true labels. So that's actually what we are trying to do. I mean, the synthetic data will be augmenting our real ground truth data, which is limited. So I can give you example numbers. There are regions in the world, particularly in the agriculture, that we have been working a lot, that we have good data. For example, in Western Cape State in South Africa, I'm going beyond US because US has all the data, Europe has all the parcel land. So those are parts of the world that we have data for, we are not much worried. But if you go outside of the developed world, there is significantly lack of data. Part of it, okay, they have, I was giving the example of Western Cape in South Africa. They do census every 2 years of every agricultural field in this state, and they have all of the field boundaries, crop types, irrigation status, and everything. So that's a high quality data. You can test models on that, removing some of them, do semi-supervised and things like that. Then you go to neighboring country close by, Kenya. We just could get around hundreds of fields, around 400, 500 fields, the whole Western Kenya that we have been working with multiple teams. So that's the discrepancy you can see in different countries around the world. And what these synthetic data can do is augmenting that limited data and also let us know if we can transfer our knowledge. I think the transferability is another part of it. Can we use the high quality, dense data in South Africa, generate synthetic data, or a good model, and we are trying that as well, that can go back to Kenya and do classification. So it's a mix of, I think, combination of synthetic data and how you train your classification model. We are now trying both of them at the same time. We also invest in generating more true data. I think we are not gonna kind of stop doing that, but we know that that is not gonna scale to every country, everywhere that we can get really high quality data. We are trying to augment that with synthetic data. Okay. It seems Will was happy. Ian, are there any interesting ML projects using SAR or radar that you have seen? We have worked on one ourselves, which is surface water detection. I would say it is one of the easy problems in SAR because SAR has a good signature in SAR. It is a very smooth surface. You don't get much noise from the surface, while there are false positives from mountain shadows and other kind of topographic features that you get. SAR is definitely one. The other one is trying to understand the crop phenology from SAR, particularly in regions that are cloudy, because Sentinel-2 and optical data, you get almost zero. It's maybe too much, but very few scenes around the year. And you can't really do a seasonal monitoring with that. So one of the interesting problems I saw once was a European group was trying to understand the phenology of the crop and mimic that using a machine learning model from SAR. So train a SAR on an optical data to tell you about the phenology of the crop. I think that has been one of the very cool problems in SAR that I have seen. Beyond that, I think in SAR and like change detection, and those are also very much of high importance. And it's the only data set that can enable that. You can do that kind of quick and very high quality change detection with optical data necessarily. Nell says, not a question, but I participated in the window speed competition and it was a great experience. Thank you for sharing that. Looking forward to participate in the next one. That was very encouraging. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, hopefully all of you can participate in the future ones. And yeah, we haven't released the kind of winning codes from that, but that's going to happen soon in the next couple of days or the week. Yeah. If there are any other questions, feel free to share. But that's all I see until now in the chat. Yeah.
I can ask a small question while maybe others are thinking. Did you see some interesting artifacts in the artificially generated data, like something that like a physical law was not preserved? Something like that you can see as like, okay, how can we kind of going forward? Maybe the model needs more than that.
I would say in the initial phases that we were still kind of building a good model, we would see that, and those would be more into the patterns you would see on the ground. Suddenly you would see a very bright surface, for example, compared to the neighboring pixels, which you would know easily doesn't happen unless you have like a human structure or something, but it looked like a natural surface, but it was like a block of very bright surface. We would see some of those, but when we really trained the model, and it really mimicked, we had a good kind of convergence in the training with validation, and we don't see that much anymore. The only thing we see is lack of representation. So because our data is from like a region that is dominated by a lot of bare grounds and less urban areas, and I would say human impact surfaces, let's put it that way, we see a lot of pixels or a lot of images in the synthetic data being bare ground. While the patterns are realistic, but the land surface type or the land cover is bare ground. And that's partly because the training data was skewed toward that. So that's one of the things we're going to change in the next version, go to a broader region, have a more diverse and balanced training data set so the model can learn all the different classes.
Thank you. There's like a couple of more questions.
Let's see. David, thank you for a great job. Most of today's ML with EO research involves 2D image data or multi-spectral stacks of 2D images, all on uniform grids without missing data. Can you comment on requirements for more sparse 3D data sets becoming available like ISAT2 and JEDI? Yeah, so that's a very good point, David. A lot of these data sets or things that we are doing are images. Let's put it simply there. And I think the reason for that is we are all mimicking what computer vision world has been doing. We haven't been like, let's be honest with ourselves, we haven't been innovating on the ML world, how we can better use our data sets like the point cloud data, the ISAT2 and JEDI are examples of those. There is some work going on in the community, and that is by making more data available. For example, the point cloud data that US has from many of the airborne campaigns is now becoming available on AWS. So that is bringing more data to the people who can easily play with it. I have seen an application, people are trying to use that to generate like biomass estimations using like some machine learning approaches, and then using basically ground measurement data from some of the national forest plots that have samples on the ground to build a good training data set. So we're just beginning to see that. Part of it needs some ML to kind of technical and theoretical work as well. We can't simply transfer a CNN model and a read and an image work to there. I think it's growing, but we are behind. So it needs some, I would say, theoretical development. And I think agencies like NASA and NSF would be interested to fund those researches. So if you have ideas, I'm sure I have been on some of the panels at NASA, and they are interested in funding those kind of very theoretical approaches. Requirements, strategies, tools is Radian thinking about that. So the only thing we have invested in that domain is more on the again, data catalogs for making those data available. So Stack that I mentioned, for example, has this extension for point cloud data that make it more easily available to people. We haven't done much in the training data world of that. But if there are interesting problems you're interested, you wanna brainstorm or see if we can work together, I would be happy to be in touch. But yeah, not ourselves immediately. I would say we haven't done anything yet.
Okay, so as I said, we have more time for these kind of questions and discussions. The only thing is we'll have to switch to the other Zoom link, which I put in the chat, so everybody who is interested can join. We'll try to just recreate whatever would happen normally. If somebody's visiting, we can just stay longer and talk to each other. But we have to deal with the technological challenges of it. So thank you, Hamed. Thank you, everybody. This is last talk for the quarter. So I guess we'll see you all in a week or so for the next seminar. And we'll see you hopefully in the other Zoom.
Thank you.